how that problem is sort of evolving in our society and sort of what the pushback to that is.
I would say it's really interesting because, yes, there, I believe, are more meals that I'd have to see all the statistics, but it is really interesting when I was sitting through a training, and I've gone through multiple trainings and trying to learn more, is that everyone can be at risk to mental health. Because I was listening to a training through a gal from Transitions Mental Health, and what she was talking about was there's no one thing that we can say, oh, this is the thing that causes it. There's mental health issues, like there can be bipolar, people can be at higher risk who maybe have a known mental illness, but there's also situational, there's also circumstantial, where something can happen to somebody in their life, let's just say, and this was an eye-opener to me, say when they're young, maybe they went through some form of abuse and it was never dealt with. And then they moved on a few years later and they had a friend die or a parent die, a death in the family. And then that built upon the next trauma. And then maybe that person went into a relationship and their, boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with them. Yeah. And boom, it was trauma after trauma. And then another situation happened. Mm-hmm. And often young people, their brains aren't fully developed yet to where understanding that things can be better tomorrow.
Yeah.
Do you see? And so the buildup of those things. And so there's not one thing that we can say, this is the number one, reason why. There can be multiple things, even being in the middle of COVID when people were isolated into their homes. And people had a really difficult time with that isolation process. Some people probably loved it and they did their homework and their work and it was all good. But many people aren't good with that. And so being around people, and having that social interaction. So realizing that everyone can be at risk. There are people groups that are more at risk. Veterans are very high risk. And even to another point is people who have actually lost a loved one to suicide are at far greater risk of suicide themselves. Yeah. And that is why one of our programs, because of the deep trauma that as a mother and my husband and my children went through this traumatic loss. And it's a thing called complicated grief. It's not just that you're grieving someone, but you are also going through, how did this happen? The trauma of the actual loss. And so Knowing You Matter has started grief and trauma process groups for people who have lost a loved one to suicide, including even if they've lost a friend, to where we could pay attention to all of the family members and the friends who have now just lost somebody. Like for me, losing a child, to me, was the most horrific thing that's ever happened to me. And I didn't know, how am I going to get through this? And so dealing with that trauma, these classes help people to be able to understand what's happening to their body, what's happening to my brain, and what are some coping tools that I can use to get through this.
And not to try to have you explain all that in one conversation, but like, what are some of the coping mechanisms you guys teach to people? What are some of the practical ways that people can deal with grief, and grief specific to losing someone to suicide?
Breathing, breath work, journaling, talking about your person, doing a living legacy of your child, which is exactly what we've done through Knowing You Matter, is to know that the legacy and love of Mikey's life is going to live on through Knowing You Matter. To be able to say, hey, we have free resources. We care. We care about you. And we've already served over 100 people in a very short period of time that have lost somebody to suicide. And it's making a significant difference and letting that person know, hey, we want to give you the tools to be able to deal through your grief and trauma so that you can be whole and you can, help other people.